On today's show, what will Shane Wright's AHL conditioning stint do for his game this season? All that and much more on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, I bring you everything prospects related 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I am Hattie Kalakash. I'm a scout and prospect analyst across multiple platforms, including this one. I've got a really good show for you today. First and foremost, I wanted to give you a bit of my thoughts on Shane Wright's AHL conditioning stint and what that will do in order to, work into his development and help him out in terms of, developing new assets to his game. Then later on, we've got Erica Ayala, the host of Locked On Kraken, who's going to be on to talk about Shane Wright some more. She's interviewed him and she's been following him pretty closely, so I value her insight on that. And then we'll talk about Matty Beniers, who is on an absolute tear lately with 11 points in his last 5 games. But before we get into any of that, just remember to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And remember to follow us on your favorite podcasting platforms and make us your first listen of the day. It's always very much appreciated. So let's get right into it. Shane Wright, his development and his ice time in the NHL so far with the Seattle Kraken has been a hot topic lately. He's averaged 8 minutes and 6 seconds of ice time so far on the season in the NHL with the Seattle Kraken, and this is through 7 games. He's only got 1 assist so far, so his production isn't up to par, but it does reflect the amount of ice time he is getting. The highest he had in terms of ice time was two NHL games ago on November 3rd versus Minnesota, where he played 13 minutes and 45 seconds. The next game, he played 8 minutes and 42 seconds against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then he got sent down to the Coachella Valley Firebirds on a conditioning stint. So, since going to the AHL with Coachella Valley, he has played much better. If you just look at the stat line, that's already obvious. He's got 4 goals in 3 games for Coachella Valley. He's got goals in each of the 3 games he's played so far, and he scored on 4 of his 5 shots. So he only had 5 shots in those 3 games, but he capitalized on 4 of them. Um, all of those shots were valid shots. They weren't sort of, dumps from corners where he shouldn't be shooting. They were all, he was shooting at the right moments. And that was really important for me. Um, and that's pretty much on par with what we saw in this draft year, in terms of his mentality when he's shooting. He never tended to shoot from, non-dangerous ice. He's always been the type of guy to close in on the slot, to close in on the dots and take shots from closer into the netminder. And that's reflected in the scoring, in those 3 games. I managed to catch the game where he scored 2 goals. That was against the Abbotsford Wranglers on November 24th. And I saw a very much more proactive and confident Shane Wright. The type of player who I saw in his draft here, the type of player who can lead a team, not just, in terms of his example on the ice, but also off the ice, talking to teammates, all that stuff. It was very evident that Shane Wright was in his element at the AHL level. Now he's got 2 games left on his conditioning stint. The conditioning stint is supposed to be 5 games maximum, so he's probably going to be playing the next 2 AHL games of the Coachella Valley Firebirds, on their team. But to go back to sort of what I've seen from Shane Wright in terms of his trajectory, the way that he's been playing, and how that's sort of, what's improved since he went from the NHL to the AHL. So as I mentioned, he's much more proactive and confident at the AHL level. He's stepping into passes with his head up and his eyes set on the goal. He's thinking 2 steps ahead at all times. And the Firebirds even have set plays for Shane Wright where they set him up on the right dot. And it was very obvious that he was benefiting from that because he's able to manage set plays really well because of his intelligence and his understanding of how to misdirect opponents, how to send them the wrong way, how to make them think that he's doing something when he's actually trying to do something else. And oftentimes he was the best player on the ice, not just on the power play, but at 5-on-5 as well for the Coachella Valley Firebirds. It was really impressive to see him go about it in the AHL. But what's important is how does that help him improve? Well, he's playing at a level where he can keep up. That's first and foremost, where he's getting all the opportunities to shine as well, and where he can still develop his tools. So the things that need improving in his game, it's not something that he can only develop at the NHL level. There are some prospects who just don't think the game at an NHL level. That is not the case for Shane Wright. His processing, his understanding of play, it's on par with the best NHL thinkers. I think his processing is really, really good and is already at an NHL level. What needs to catch up is the rest of his body. His feet don't keep up with his mind oftentimes. One other thing that really needs work in Shane Wright's game in that sense is his stamina. So he's thinking very well, but he doesn't have the energy to keep it up on a full shift. So he's shortening his shifts. And he's always been the type of prospect to stop moving his feet and just sort of survey the ice, evaluate his option, take in information. And that has its merits entirely. Patrice Bergeron does this sometimes at the NHL level. But in the NHL, especially in the bottom six, where he's placed in a position where he has to move his feet at all times for a full 1 minute shift, that becomes difficult for him. That's the part that's hard. But he can work on that at any level. So this is a prospect who put up 94 points in 63 games in his draft year, almost an assist per game, 62 assists in that span. He's no slouch offensively, especially when he has a time to evaluate his options. But at the NHL level, again, time is quickly taken away. Most players of his caliber adapt and develop these skills with time, but it does take time. It's not something that is developed from one day to the other just by playing in the NHL. It's just about bringing his entire skill set one or two speeds forward, and that is primarily why I think he'd be better off going to the OHL, going to the World Juniors at the end of this month, and just being allowed to dominate while working on his tools. I think that would be what would be most important for Shane Wright, is just to continue working on his skills individually, his endurance, his speed, all that stuff, while being in an environment where he's playing 20 to 25 minutes a game and where he can visually see the results of his labor in the gym, in the dressing room. The things that he need to work on don't require NHL ice time. What he needs right now is the environment in order to flourish offensively, which is by playing him as much as possible. And we see that in the AHL. He's good enough for the AHL. He's already a pro thinker. It's just about bringing his skill set up one or two notches entirely, and just raising the baseline of his skills, because he can do everything he does when he has the time to figure out his options. He scans and evaluates his options really well. He understands which of the options available to him are the best, but the struggle comes when he needs to do all of that quickly. And again, he can work on that at any level. I don't think the NHL is what is necessary for his game. But this is one of many examples with Shane Wright of why he would be, better off in the OHL. The main, also the probably the biggest thing for me is confidence. I think he's lacking confidence right now when he's playing under 10 minutes a night, most nights, where he's getting scratched half the time. 20 games into the season, I don't think it's rational for Shane Wright to have only played 7 games. If you're going to keep him up for, to play him good minutes, to give him line mates that can feed off of him really well, that can teach him a couple things even. But if he's going to be playing under 10 minutes, he's better off playing at a level where he can play double that time on a nightly basis, work on his stamina, work on his endurance, push the 25-minute mark in terms of ice time a night, which will help his stamina and just overall improve his game. It just doesn't make sense to me. But now we'll hear from Erica about Shane Wright and also Matty Beniers in terms of the two biggest prospects in the Seattle Kraken system right after these messages.
Do you like betting? BetOnline.net is your number one source for any wager that interests you. From the NFL to the NBA to the MLB and even NCAA football, UFC, golf, anything you like, they have you covered. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in depth analysis on every game on their website or app. They're, of course, a great source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting so you can keep up with bets as they unfold. They've got up to the minute scores for every sport out there. They're the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts.
All right, so this is Locked On NHL Prospects. I've got with me the host of Locked On Kraken, Erica Ayala. First and foremost, how have you been doing?
I've been well, Hattie. It's great to catch up with you. The Seattle Kraken, I think, are in a really unique point in time in their growth and development as a team, not only this season but obviously as a franchise. So
Mhm.
at times it's not the most fun, or I should say sometimes it's a little bit stress inducing to watch this team, but I really do think they have made strides and are leaps and bounds in a better position. So that's always fun. But thank you so much for asking and for having me on.
Of course, of course. So yeah, the Kraken have been on a 6-game winning streak. One player who we're going to mention later on has been a big part of that. But first and foremost, you interviewed Shane Wright. I just wanted to know first and foremost, sort of the main talking points and what you took away from him.
Yeah, so I was able to speak with Shane Wright. He was at Acrisure at practice with the Coachella Valley Firebirds. That is going to be the arena. They're still on the road though because it's not properly ready. But later this month in December, the Coachella Valley Firebirds will open up that arena. But he was in good spirits, which you'll love to see and to hear. And it was really great talking with him. We did talk about just what it's been like to be a pro, and what has happened since his draft. We know that there's been so much energy and news that has come along with what he is and sometimes isn't doing with the Seattle Kraken or otherwise. And, he has talked about where is at in his development, and what's important for him to grow. A lot of what we've been hearing and what Shane also said in that conversation was it's about growing his confidence, getting better every shift, every day, and taking the lessons from it all. We also, of course, talked about that he has 2 more games with Coachella Valley before he gets bumped up and will be back with the Seattle Kraken, and determinations will be made there. We'll also figure out if he's going to play with Canada, Team Canada for World Juniors. I did ask him. He says there's no, he doesn't have a surefire answer, that those are still things that are in a conversation, and that will be decided at an appropriate time, but he's not exactly sure what that's going to look like, and that's in line with what we've been hearing from the Seattle Kraken as well.
Makes sense for sure. And I don't know if you got a chance to ask him, but does he feel like anything in his game specifically has progressed since his draft year?
I think, we didn't speak specifically to that question, but just overall since the draft, and what has happened in this whirlwind of a handful of months, he has
Mhm.
talked about, again, just being able to grow that confidence, being able to work on his fitness, and be able to really work on his compete level overall. Those are
Mhm.
pretty standard hockey answers, but in his case, I think those are the things that will make the difference for
Mhm.
him being able. And we talked about this a little bit on Locked on Kraken on an upcoming show, on that show where we talked to Shane. But
Mhm.
those are going to be the things that he'll need to continue to refine and to show that he is improving when it comes to his game, to show that he can be on pace to play in the NHL on a more consistent basis.
For sure, and I was lucky enough to catch one of his 3 games so far with the Coachella Valley Firebirds. He played against the Wranglers, the Calgary Flames' affiliate, and he scored 2 goals in that game. It was a back-to-back against them. I saw him a lot more proactive, a lot more sort of intent on pushing the pace, taking shots on net, just a lot more confidence from him in general. He seemed more fit for that level of play. I just wanted your thoughts on him in the NHL and just to share with our viewers a bit what you've noticed from him in the NHL and what needs to be brought to the game in order for him to get more opportunities with that team.
And I think what I've said before and what we talk about on Locked on Kraken is that Shane Wright wasn't noticeable. And
Mhm.
I think there's a few different ways that you can say it, but I really do mean that in as neutral a way as possible. Was
Mhm.
he out there making a bunch of mistakes? No. Was he finding ways to impact the game? No,
Mhm.
in my opinion. I think he was doing and making standard hockey plays, which a lot of elite level NHL players do every night, and they don't make the score sheet, but they are very valuable to their team. So when I say he didn't necessarily stand out, that's not a bad thing.
Mhm.
It just is what it is. That being said, I think there's a little bit, so we have to, and it's an unfortunate situation, I'm sure, for him to be in, but we
Mhm.
have to separate a lot of the hype that we're hearing from what his actual development track is going to be. And I think that's the hardest thing right now for the fan base to do. So in my mind, I didn't think that he did anything necessarily outstanding or exemplar to impact the game to necessarily win pucks. He wasn't coughing up pucks either. He wasn't making turnovers. He wasn't, committing silly penalties or making mistakes that other teammates had to clean up. So what I would like to see from him, and what I think we have seen in the AHL, is he's made an impact. He's shown confidence. He's shown that he can find the puck, particularly in his first pro goal. You look at that sequence and you see him aggressively find the puck, win the puck, enter the offensive zone with speed, and then be clinical with his shot to finish. And that is what we want to see from his caliber of player, given what he's done in juniors, given where he's been drafted, and given what the Seattle Kraken need. That's what we're expecting. So I love that we've seen it at the AHL level. We didn't see it early from him in Seattle. Again, don't think that's necessarily a problem, but now I'm very curious if he'll get some more time and some more minutes, and I'll be really basing now what he does at the NHL with a little bit more information of what we've been able to see him with at a pro level with the Coachella Valley Firebirds.
Of course, yeah. And one thing I noticed in this draft here was Shane Wright's shot is kind of it's like a cheat code. Like he doesn't really put much, like his mechanics aren't refined. He's not really sort of using his legs too much. He doesn't have the most outlandish windup, but the puck just zips off his stick extremely quickly. For me, usually when you see a player like that who doesn't have the strongest mechanics but a very, very heavy shot, it's usually just brute strength, but I don't see that with Wright either. So I've never been able to perfectly pinpoint what it is about a shot that is so outstanding. Short release, very deceptive, very difficult to read. Just a very strange shot that works really well. Now he hasn't scored in the NHL. Is that just a lack of opportunity? Has he been taking shots at a decent enough rate, do you think, or is there something else?
I think it is a lack of opportunity. I think it's fair to say that he has not been taking shots at as much of an opportunity. He hasn't had much opportunity. His time on ice, average time on ice, has been a big talking point. I did think it was interesting, though, Ron Francis, as we're speaking, early in December, Ron Francis, our general manager for the Seattle Kraken, recently gave an interview at the end of November where he said that some of what Shane's lack of time was as he said, quote, self-inflicted, in that Shane was taking short shifts. And so that's a really interesting wrinkle to add for Ron Francis to add, because I think that speaks a little bit to the confidence that we keep hearing, but then also the opportunity. If Shane, regardless of what everyone else is saying, if Shane wants more opportunity, then when he does hit the ice, he needs to really go all out and be able to utilize that time. So I don't think we've seen enough, not even close, to be able to see him get the shot that we've seen in the AHL off in games where he's playing for the Seattle Kraken. He has had some opportunities, but those were more loose pucks in front and just kind of, can he get the stick out and beat the defense and the goalie? And so I think that's a little bit more when we have seen him. That's what it's been, but hasn't been set plays. He hasn't had much time on special teams. So we haven't been able to see him in those opportunities, but he has done that in the AHL. So the big question now is, will Seattle, or I should say, has Dave Haxtell and the Seattle Kraken, have they seen enough to now give him more opportunities when he is with the Seattle Kraken?
Let's hope that's the case. All right, one last little question real quick. Is there anything from your interview with Shane Wright that stood out that we haven't mentioned so far?
We did a little bit of just talking about his process and tried to keep it fun and light to get a little bit more of his personality. What I can say is, whether it was things that we were recording or just as we were kind of getting things set up. And there's a little fun caveat if you go over to Locked On Kraken where he's literally tilted because there was a tech issue, and I think I got to see a little bit more of his personality, everything from like the death glare to his lack of time on the ice. I haven't gotten a good sense of what his real personality is. And I didn't get to go out to training camp this year. I did it in the inaugural season. So that was extremely fun to see, and to see that he's in good spirits. Yes, of course he has some of the standard hockey answers, but even outside of that, he felt comfortable having a conversation. He took all of the questions in stride, and for me, I think that does speak to again, building that confidence and just the comfortability being a professional. And we talked about that a lot. What is it like for him? What is he learning when it comes to being a pro hockey player? So I think that stood out to me. Again, his media availability for Seattle, it's not like he was stone-faced all the time. He was pretty jovial. He's 18 and showing it. But his comfort and his confidence, I do see growing incrementally, and that's good. That's good for him just as a person, but certainly good for Shane Wright, the hockey player.
For sure. And that's one thing that stood out when I interviewed him at the draft, is just the comfort that he has in front of the camera, with media, all that stuff. It was very evident that this was a guy who's had the limelight for a while and has gotten used to having it and knows what to do with it. But we're going to be back to discuss Matty Beniers and his improvement over the last couple of games right after these messages. And we're back with more from Erica Ayala. We've got one more prospect to look over and discuss together. A Calder candidate, I think the leading candidate at this point in the Calder race, and that's Matty Beniers. So first and foremost, Matty Beniers went from having 6 games in a row where he didn't register a single point to all of a sudden putting up 11 points in the last 5 games. What has changed, and how has this game sort of modified in those 2 halves of the last 10-ish games?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it was very noticeable when Matty Beniers was not getting on the score sheet, no points, so 0 goals, 0 assists. It was very noticeable, and at a time I had to correct myself and realize that he's still a rookie. And the reason it was so noticeable is because he was so involved before as far as the score sheet goes. As far as what has changed in his game on a game-to-game basis, I would argue that not much has changed. I never got the sense that he was in a slump, that he had any kind of yips or anything like that. He never looked like he was overthinking or anything. He was still very active, still very aggressive. So I'm not sure that too much has changed, except that sometimes people, when you shuffle the puck over to them, sometimes they score, sometimes they don't. But then also, I think what you've seen from Matty Beniers is that he's learning how to, when other people, and so maybe this is one concrete thing that I've noticed and that have led to some of his more recent goals is that he's making sure that he's cycling and that he's reading rebounds really well. So Matty Beniers has always been fantastic and continues to be fantastic at being aggressive, entering the offensive zone. He had a great assist. I think it was on Schultz like a few games ago, where he's wrapping around the back of the net and just like a perfect precision pass is able to get that through and get the Seattle Kraken a goal. But that started from even before he entered the offensive zone, him winning puck battles, him using his speed and using his strength on the puck to be able to maintain possession. So all of those things Matty Beniers has still been doing. A little bit of it is just that things are opening up, but then I would also say that he's also reading things better and learning how to not only set people up, but also identify when his line mates are shooting where he needs to be and anticipating a little bit better where that puck could pour out and getting those second chance goals for his line, for the Seattle Kraken, and then of course for his own stat sheet.
For sure. So now he's pivoting the second line so far with Jared McCann and Jordan Eberle. How do those players play off of him? Do you think they've been a positive influence on his game so far, or would he be better off with different line mates?
That's interesting. And we've seen the lines switch a little bit for the Seattle Kraken. So we've seen Matty Beniers play with Burakovsky. He's played with Eberle and Schwartz. I think Matty Beniers honestly really fits well up and down this lineup. I haven't seen him play too much with, at least at even strength, with the likes of Yanni Gord, Brandon Tanev, but I think he could definitely match their energy and how they like to dictate pace. He's obviously played with Ryan Donato before, and Daniel Sprong is mostly finding himself on that fourth line as well. So I do think that Matty Beniers can fit in well with anyone. The thing that I like about him playing with, when he does play with Schwartz and Eberle, and McCann fits in there because McCann played with Schwartz and Eberle for a while. Those three players for me are they're just solid. They're just solid. They're not necessarily going to exude the most energy, which in my estimation means that there is a calming factor. They can also switch speeds really well. Matty Beniers does that really well. And they read the ice at such an intelligent level. And I do think that's why Matty Beniers is able to thrive there. So I think that he's learning from Jared McCann, who's one of our top goal scorers, who has a knack for the net. He's learning what it takes to be a goal scorer. He's learning from Schwartz and Eberle when he's playing with them respectively, on how to also impact the game on the offensive side, create for himself, but also create for his teammates. And so that is really opening up his game, which I think is his strong suit, that he is a true centerman and that he has to do a little bit of all of those things. And so, I think that, again, Matty Beniers could play up and down this lineup and we would be absolutely fine. But playing with McCann, playing with Schwartz, and when he is able to play with Eberle as well, I think those players are just solid. They are a core for the Seattle Kraken team. And I think it's, if anything, really building up what the Seattle Kraken want Matty Beniers to be in the future, which is a leader, someone that can impact on the ice, but also, if you ask his teammates, much to their surprise, Matty Beniers is a talker. He's very comfortable in the group chat. He's comfortable in the locker room. And so he's likable. He's creating relationships with guys that have been in his position before, young rookies with a lot of expectations. So I think it's really not anything that on a day-to-day basis you're seeing impact his game, more so as rounding out who he is as a player and a leader. And that is going to be awesome for him and certainly for the Seattle Kraken.
Of course. I would say the words to define his line mates right now are solid, yes, but dependable.
Yeah.
That's the main thing with Eberle, with McCann, with Schwartz. Those guys are they're very predictable, and that's very good for, predictable in the sense of, when you're on their line, where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And I think that's the best thing for Matty Beniers right now. Now, in his draft year, the main thing I noticed, the biggest asset that Matty Beniers had even back then was his tenacity, was how intense he was on the forecheck, how good he was at creating multiple waves of pressure on his own. Do you think that's still his strongest asset, or has there been something else that stood out since then?
No, absolutely. Tenacity is a great way of saying it. I was talking earlier about him being able to win pucks, particularly in that neutral zone, then come in with speed, and the tenacity of him, not only to be able, again, to be strong on the puck. So he's, withstanding any defense that's coming to try and check that puck or poke it away, but also the tenacity to, and the intelligence. So it's a blend of this tenacity, but also this intelligence where he can say, all right, I'm going to stick with this play, even though the first opportunity didn't open up. Okay, I thought this was going to be another opportunity. You can almost see him thinking the game in real time and reacting to what the other team and the defense is giving him. And to your point about the dependability of his line mates, knowing, okay, this is where Schwartz likes the puck. And this is what you hear, right? This is what you hear from Yanni Gord, who was interviewed by Ryan S. Clark. This is what you're hearing from Schwartz, from Eberle, that Matty Beniers can find them. And so that dependability and him having that tenacity to fight through, but then also the IQ and the intelligence to know this is where I'm going to connect with Schwartz. If I get that puck there, if I fight through, he's going to be there. He's going to be there on the doorstep, and that's a goal for us. That's what I love about Matty's game.
100%. So you've just sort of zeroed in on the two things that I love the most about any prospect, the two things I scout for the most: tenacity and intelligence. When those two things combine, you get players like Matty Beniers. But this is going to be it for today's episode. Just remind everyone where they can find you and the Locked On Kraken podcast.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much, Hadi, for having me on. But you can find the Locked On Kraken podcast wherever you find your podcast. And of course, on our YouTube channel, you can find me personally on all social media channels, at elindsay08. That's ELINDSAY08.
Perfect. Yeah. And you can find us at LO_NHL Prospects on Twitter. We're on YouTube as Locked On NHL Prospects and on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like what you've been watching on YouTube, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. This has been Hadi Kalakash with Erica Ayala as a guest host. We will see you next time.